Everyone, I hope you're doing well. In today's video, we're going to be tuning the speakers specifically at my church in this room using the Behringer X32. Now, even if you don't have the Behringer X32, there's a lot of principles that are going to apply, especially if you have a home studio and you're looking to make your overall system sound a lot better, because honestly this EQ looks absolutely nuts, but there's a reason for everything. So in today's video, I'm going to be very thorough to walk you through step by step the process for you to evaluate your listening environment, whether that is a humongous sanctuary auditorium like this, or if you're in a home studio environment. A lot of the principles are gonna apply. So make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button for more videos just like this. My name is Chris Green. Let's get started tuning this room. Okay, so here's some dimensions of this room. Again, it may not necessarily apply to you, but just so you know what's going on in this space. If you go from the back wall where the media booth is all the way up to where we have the choir loft, okay, that's about 70 feet. And then if you go another 20 feet, that gets you all the way to the baptistry. So in all, we're talking about a 90-foot in depth. And then as far as width is concerned, the sanctuary is 68 feet wide, and then up in the choir loft space, it is 40 feet wide. So we kind of have this bottleneck effect happening. Now, there's not a lot of crazy stuff in this room other than the mid-range. And I will point this out. Most of the spaces kind of like this, I've been in churches before that have like a basketball court or some sort of hardwood floors. We don't have a lot of reflective surfaces here in this room. Okay, so there's a lot of good things working for it. Number one is these pews. These pews are solid wood and they are cushioned. So we're gonna get a lot of absorption, and you're also gonna get absorption from the carpet. Everything in here is a very thick carpet, and that includes the stage. Not a lot of stages nowadays have this carpet feature, but again, you can just tell from the dimensions of the room, it's kind of its own beast. Nothing is a rectangle, nothing is a box, which is good to know. And let me just say disclaimer wise that I am aware that yes, it would be ideal if we had a bunch of bass traps, if we could acoustically treat the walls and ceilings. That's not gonna be happening in this space. And most people who are in a church sanctuary like this, you're gonna have to have some sort of building fund put together if you're gonna be redoing your entire sound system. So we're taking the sound system that we have and we're just trying to make it sound better. Whenever you're EQing your speakers or EQing the room, you need to first find out, can you address the acoustic treatment? Can you put bass traps up? Can you get some sort of absorption material? Because that's gonna go way further than simply slapping on an EQ. Essentially, that's where we're at today. So now with the dimensions of the room, the overall setup as well, this is liable to change in the future other than the line array. So we do have two sets of line array speakers up in the ceiling. Those are giving us quote unquote our mains, and then we have a sub that is placed in the drum booth. Now we recently moved over to electronic drums. I'll be doing a video on that in the future. This is a Roland kit and it sounds awesome, and it does help with the sound. Okay, so we're getting an isolated sound from the drums, and we can also put the subwoofer in the drum booth. Now, aesthetically speaking, there are things that we just can't get away with in this church. So in this space, if I were to take the subwoofer and put it in front of the pulpit, that would probably be ideal as far as sound quality goes, but it takes away the aesthetic. So I've got to be careful that if I place anything, if I move anything, we need to keep the overall aesthetic in place. Okay, so that's why our subwoofer, it is out front-ish, but it's behind this drum booth, and that's just something we have to deal with. Now in this video, there's a few things I'm going to be using that I want to recommend that you check out. The first one is this dB Meter app. So it's literally called dB Meter. This should be on the App Store or Google Play Store. Just search dB space meter, and I believe that this was free. Now this has been on my phone for years and years and years. I'm 90% sure it is a free app. There are some paid versions that you can add on some spectrum analysis and all these sorts of things, but essentially I've just used the dB meter for what it is. Now it is reading my voice right now. My voice is roughly about 80 decibels. Is it really 80 decibels? I don't necessarily trust that this is exactly what it is. Like it could be 82 decibels, it could be 86, but I'm using it for proportions, and proportions are very important. So when I'm playing music in this room, I'll take a recording of a worship team, something from Chris Tomlin or from Brandon Lake. I'll play it in the room and I'll set this phone on the media booth counter, and I want to see how much level are we getting. So if it tells me 80, I'm going with 80. Doesn't mean that this is super accurate and that 80 is definitely what's there, but it's giving me the number 80. Then when our worship team is in here, we're playing music. If I see something like 90, if I see something like 100, I know that we are way too loud, because mastered music that's already been recorded, limited, and mastered should not be quieter than what we're performing live, okay? So if I've got it set at 80, it's telling me 80. I like the sound of 80 in the room. Then when we are performing live and I step out here, open up my dB meter, I want to see something close to 80. So you'll see me use this in today's video, specifically when we're setting pink noise or we're listening to music in the room. I mainly just want to see, what is the phone telling me number-wise? Am I getting 80, 90, whatever? So I did notice that in the front of the room, this will be true of like every venue you go to. If you get closer to the speakers, it's louder. And from the back of the sanctuary to the front of the sanctuary is roughly 10 decibels louder than the back of the sanctuary. Again, I've got this set to C weighted, which is what we use for the monitor calibration in the home studio. I'm like 90% sure, but it's been set to C weighting the whole time I've had this app. Like I said before, I don't care what the number is. It could be 74. I'm using it just so I can check as I'm going that I'm not getting louder or quieter. So the dB meter app, you want to check that out. Now, the other thing you're going to see in this video, and is very important when it comes to testing your room, and that is our measurement microphone. Now, this is the Sonarworks one. I'm going to try and use my fingers to cover up the serial code, but I got this many years ago, and I'll tell you this. I also used to own the Behringer RTA microphone, which you can get for very cheap on Amazon, or at least I used to be able to get it very cheap. If they still sell it, you need to check that out, because when it comes to microphones like this is not a microphone that I would use to mic up a piano or any sort of instrument. This is specifically meant to give us a flat response for when we're testing the room. Now, Sonarworks is cool because they have software that can go with this. They'll give you a calibration file so that you know the exact frequency response that this microphone is capable of producing. And that's about it. So you need some sort of RTA microphone. There are other brands out there. DBA, I think, makes one as well. But you really don't need to be spending a lot of money, because like I said, unless you're doing this for a living, I would check out the Behringer one. I'll try to link these in the description of the video. Make sure you have some sort of RTA microphone. Now, this is an omnidirectional microphone. So you see people sometimes on YouTube, they have them oriented like this. Sometimes they have them like this. I do what they do in the video. Sonarworks will tell you to take it like this and point this directly at the speakers. Now, what I'm doing in this situation is I've got a boom stand in the middle of the sanctuary, the middle section of pews. Probably what I would say is the ideal listening spot. It's about 3/4 of the way back in the room, and I've got it pointed about eye level straight at the pulpit. And I'm leaving this alone. Everything you're gonna hear or see in this video, the microphone is in the same position. Now, you don't have to be using the Behringer X32 console to be doing this kind of thing. You can do this on a PreSonus mixer as well. You can also do this at home with your audio interface. I've done videos like this before in the past. I'll try to link that in the description as well. Lots of stuff in the description today. So, but I've done this before at home. The same sort of stuff applies. You're gonna wanna point this about in the middle of your listening position. And then if you wanna use an EQ, it's okay, but usually in a home studio environment, I recommend you check out the Sonarworks software. The Behringer X32 has an EQ on the main fader, and I'm going to be using that today. It's not meant to be drastic, it's pretty subtle, but that's generally the overview of the room and also the tools that we're using in today's video. Now, I'm going to be using pink noise when I'm testing the speakers. Pink noise is basically going to give me every frequency at the same volume, so we want to see a very flat response. Now, music, of course, is not meant to be flat. We like to hear more low end than we do some of the lower mids and upper mids, okay? So music is gonna look a little more like this, but when we're doing the testing, we're trying to remove the effect that the room has or the PA system has on the music. I want everything that's coming out of those speakers to sound ideally just as good as it does when it comes out of iTunes or when it comes out of the music from the iMac, okay? We want to remove anything that the room might be adding. If there's spikes, I want to eliminate those spikes. If there's dips, I want to try and bring those up if possible. Like I said, this is all about just making what we've got as good as it can possibly be without resorting to having to redo the entire sound system or bring in a bunch of acoustic treatment. We're not having to spend any money other than if you don't have this microphone, you can check out the Behringer one like I mentioned earlier. All right, so here's our Behringer X32. One thing to note, every single one of my channels, at least while we're doing this measuring, I want everything to be at unity or 0 on the faders. So my subwoofer is at 0, my main fader is also at 0 or unity. These two channels here, on channels 15 and 16, we have our iMac. So this is basically what's feeding the music that we're listening to. When I'm using that dB meter and I'm setting my volume to around 90 decibels at the back of the sanctuary, I want to make sure that this is at 0. And then on the metering, I want to be hovering around -18 as much as possible. Channel 32, this is where I have the room mic. So this is the Sonarworks measurement mic. I'm not using the Sonarworks software in this setup. Anything you use, like I mentioned before, the Behringer RTA mic will do just fine. This is not meant to sound like anything, but now, one of my preferences here is that on my buses, as far as the monitors go, the speakers that are on the stage and the speakers that are in the choir loft, there's gonna be quite a few changes with those as we're going along. So I do have those muted at the moment. I think the configuration is gonna be changing, but if you do have monitors plugged in and you wanna have them being fed as well, feel free to use those. I just have them muted. Now, in order to do our room testing, we do need to use what's called a pink noise generator, and the Behringer X32 has this built in already. The first thing we want to do is to click the view button over on the monitor section. So right here to the right of the screen, we can just click view. As soon as we do, we are going to tab over to what is called the oscillator. On the oscillator page, we're going to make sure that pink noise is selected. So if it's not selected, make sure you press the encoder down, and that should be orange and it should say pink. Now in this situation, I am measuring what's coming out of our main left and right channel. If you were doing a measurement of the speakers that are on the stage, like stage wedges, you just need to assign it to the correct path. So I'm scrolling through on this encoder and I'm gonna go to where it says main left and right, and I make sure that I tap assign. So that way our pink noise is gonna be coming out of our main line array speakers. And like I said before, make sure that you have your mains set to unity. These need to be at 0. And then when it's time for the pink noise to come out, we're going to use this tab here, the level knob. It may be all the way down at infinity, which means you won't be hearing it even if I click generate. But as we need more pink noise, we can essentially bring this up probably around -18, since I mentioned before, all of our music, all of our channels are coming in at -18. So it'd be good to set this to -18. And then adjust the overall volume like I mentioned before. So whenever you're ready for pink noise to come out, you can click generate and you should hear it come out of your speakers the more you turn this knob up. As you can see, whenever I wanted it muted, I could simply just press this encoder to turn off the generate function. So anytime you need to access the oscillator, just click the view button here on the monitor page. So here I've got the dB meter on my phone sitting on top of the console. This may not be where you want to read your dB meter, but as you can see, as I'm speaking, it's reading my voice. So ambient sounds are right at about 44. If I start speaking, I'm at 71. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the pink noise generator. I'm going to click generate, and then I'm going to set this level so that the level of the pink noise is roughly around about 90 dB or so. If it's 90 here in the back of the sanctuary, I know that near the front of the sanctuary, it's going to be right at 100, which is pretty loud. So let's go ahead and hit generate, and then I'll bring up the level, and let's watch the dB meter in action. Okay, so roughly on our pink noise generator at about -26 or so, we're getting about 90 on this dB meter, and that's just fine. So here's something that we had to use as a workaround, and I encourage you to use it as well. If you don't have access to your line arrays, if you don't have a lift, and you need a quick way to attenuate the volume coming out of your main fader. Basically, if your main fader is down here and it's way too loud in the room, there's nowhere you can go. If you were to put it at unity, things will just be crazy loud, but you can't reach your power amps, you can't reach your speakers. What I've done is I went to my effects page and over on Effects 8, I loaded what is called a precision limiter on the X32. And I'm not doing any limiting, I'm not doing any compressing, there's no effect on the sound other than I'm using the output gain knob to attenuate this by 2.5 decibels. So as pink noise is coming out of the machine, if you need to turn down your speakers and you can't reach it, feel free to use the output gain knob, and that will allow you to leave your fader at 0 for you to get a comfortable volume coming out, but we're not doing any limiting, okay? So the input gain needs to be at 0. You need to make sure that you're not squeezing it or any sort of stuff like that. So as you have seen, the RTA mic on channel 32 is about in the middle of the room. This is quite possibly the ideal spot for whoever might be standing in a pew. I do have it at about eye height, that if you are standing and you're facing the pulpit, you should be just about hearing an equal sound coming from the left and the right speaker. So with my RTA plugged into channel 32, you can select it. Make sure that none of the EQ or any sort of effects are actually being used on this microphone. We don't want to have any of it coming through our stereo mix. We don't want it to be going through the sub. And then with most RTA mics, you're going to have this 48 volt phantom power enabled. Now, how you set the gain level is that when you go back to your oscillator and you click generate on the pink noise generator, you have a good sound coming out of your main fader. You adjust the gain of the microphone so that you're roughly getting about -18 on the channel. So the measurement mic in the middle of the room is going to be listening to the pink noise, and we want a healthy signal coming through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click generate on the pink noise, and then you're going to see me adjust the gain of our room measurement microphone. Okay, so we got a healthy signal coming through the X32 on the RTA mic. You'll notice that whenever you're looking at, if you hit the home page and you scroll over to this config tab, you should be able to see a clearer view of the gain structure. Whenever you're hitting about -18, you will see a yellow LED, and you'll see this also on the channels themselves. Whenever you see that yellow just lightly being tapped, it means that you have hit -18. So we have a significant amount of gain coming into the microphone. And for all intents and purposes, we are ready to check the measurement of this room. All right, so there's a few more settings to go through. If we press meters on the X32, tab over till you see the RTA, okay? On RTA, there's a few settings we need to change. We want to use the RTA as a source, so make sure you're using this encoder here. Scroll over to where it says use RTA source and make sure that that is enabled. So you should see an orange block there. We also need to go over to RTA source is solo priority right here. So make sure that that one is orange. And we need to tell it where we're using the microphone. The microphone is on channel 32. Make sure that that is set. And there's a few of these settings we need to change as well. The peak hold is basically the little bars that are popping up on the screen. How quickly do you want them to decrease and go back down? I've got mine set to 2 seconds. I've got a 2-second decay. You can also ramp this up. I've seen other people set it to as high as 6 or 8 seconds. Feel free to do whatever you wish and then set it to RMS, okay? I don't want to use the auto gain function because it's really just, it may give you a better readout on the screen. It's using more real estate, but I just trust the gain structure I've already got set up. If you want to adjust the gain here, you can set this to 30 dB. Again, this is not going to affect the sound of your system. It's just going to help it so that you're seeing more of the signal on the middle of the screen rather than you just seeing spikes down here at the bottom. Now, since we've enabled the solo priority, here is the fun stuff. So we can go back to our oscillator, and before we hit generate, I want to select the main speaker's channel, and I want to have the channel 32 on solo. So when I solo channel 32 and I've got the main channel configured, as soon as I hit generate, I'm going to go back into this channel EQ, and on the EQ for the main left and right, we'll actually be seeing what the RTA mic is giving us, okay? So I'm gonna hit generate, and you'll see me go over to the main fader, and we should be able to see a readout of what the room is sounding like. Now, as you can see very clearly, we have a lot of issues going on with the room. All these peaks being held right here. There is a massive dip in the upper mids, okay? Upper mids are very important. This is what's gonna differentiate the difference between like a human voice and a violin. I mean, all this stuff is very specific to detail. Down here, we have essentially our kick drum, bass drum, snare drum. More of the boomy instruments are going to be down here, but most of our vocals and people speaking is going to be frequencies up in this region. So the fact that we just have this massive dip right here is a little bit problematic. So what you'll do, and you can see me do this in just a minute, I'm going to turn the pink noise generator back on. We want to make sure that our EQ is enabled on the main channel. And we don't want to be using peak EQ. So every single one of your bands, they need to be set to PEQ. And I'll tell you a little shortcut on the Behringer X32. If you press both of these encoders at the same time, you will unlock basically our second low band. And then here is our second high band. They all need to be set to PEQ. I'm going to generate some noise and you're going to see me basically try to level out this entire signal. So let's go back to our oscillator. I'll hit generate and then we will treat the room. Here we go. If you want to quickly mute the generator, you can just hit the mute button on the main fader. But here's my decision making. So I basically want to keep everything clean. This indicator says that we are about -5 decibels here, and then the line above unity, we're at +5. I don't want to do more than 5 decibel increments because this is going to be on the main mix. This is everything that we're listening to in the room. From song to song, there are going to be very specific frequencies you can move around, but I don't want this to be adjusted song to song. I just want it to give us a better picture of what the room should sound like. This is not accounting for things like reverb. This is not accounting for any sort of acoustic treatment. There's not a whole lot of things you can do in the room, but as you can see, I'm basically deciding to cut a lot of this low-end garbly goop, and then I'm bringing up these upper mids. Always want to favor doing cuts over boost, but in this extreme situation, we have so much being rolled off in the mid-range, I'm okay with that boost right there. And then up here, this is a very harsh frequency. This is our sibilance, around 5K or so, and that was coming out loud and clear. So I want this to all be as flat as possible, and I think we achieved that today. Now, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button. We do have more videos that have been coming from this space. I mentioned this earlier to all my subscribers. We are expecting our second child in March. So basically the music room that you're used to seeing is going to be no more. You're going to be seeing videos from here at the church. This is where I work. I also have an office with all my guitars and stuff ready to go. So there will be videos in the future. It'll just be a different location. And the fact that we're here, there's plenty of videos that we can do. We've got the Boston grand piano, which is excellent. We also have the Roland electronic drums, and all of my instruments are here. So if you enjoy the content, if you're into music production, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.